Hello and welcome to the Magic in You, where I am here with Mark NeCamp Jr., who is an author, poet, teacher, speaker. He's also a spiritual alchemist and a modern day student and practitioner of the art of magic and the occult. One of his first spiritual traditions that he studied was hoodoo, and since then these studies have included Western ceremonial magic, alchemy, chaos magic, various schools of folk magic, indigenous witchcraft, herbalism, and psychology. Mark teaches classes using magic as a tool for personal growth, and he is also an exorcist who trains others to investigate and deal with everything from ghosts and demons to energetic parasites and other sort of metaphysical crises that can occur as a result of our connection in with the spirit world. Mark has taught at events such as Convocation, the Pagan Spirit Gathering, Paganicon, Pagan Unity Festival, Dragon Con, and many others. He has done everything from being a paranormal advisor to an indie horror flick, a paranormal advisor on the indie horror flick circle, a goth event organizer, spiritual community organizer, professional tarot reader. He is also the author of Energy Magic that was published by Moon Books Publishing, Collected Inc. And his website can be accessed below with everything else that he does. So I'm just going to bring you on the screen, Mark, and say thank you very much and welcome to the Magic in You.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such an honor. So I really greatly appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. Now, you've had quite an extensive background and training and explorations. How did you first get started on your magical journey, which I understand you said that the first teachings were hoodoo, and what were some of the main influences that's basically put you on the path?
Oh, great question. So when I grew up in the south side of Chicago, and just about mile and a half from where I grew up, there was a spiritual candle store called Lama Temple. And it was actually at the time, it's closed now, but at the time it was the largest spiritual candle manufacturer at the time. You see those candles like those 7 day candles that have the orishas, the African deities on them, everything to curse removal. I mean, they had everything, and they had oils and incenses and books and so when I was a teenager, around 16 or 17, I was really curious about all these things. Um, and part of the background of that is two major things of my upbringing. One, my mother loved horror movies. She loved horror movies. Like I probably saw the worst horror movies that scare people nowadays when I was a kid. So that was definitely one major influence. The other one is I saw ghosts and spirits and all sorts of things from a very, very young age, and to the point of, oh, do you see that man on the corner? And everyone would say, no, there's no one on the corner. Who are you talking about? So um, that was those two things kind of went together, and I just began asking some questions. And I grew up Catholic, and while my priest was extremely patient, probably overly patient with me, all things considered, it just left me looking for answers. And so I started looking into um, magic in the occult. I was just kind of curious. My mom was like, well, the candle store down the street, probably they can help you better than I can. And so there's this old man named Goldfinger, who actually had a gold tooth. um, and he pointed me in the right direction, started teaching me some things about hoodoo. And for those who don't know, hoodoo is very much an American um, juxtaposition of African slave magic that African magic that came over with the slaves, and also some Christian practices and things. So it's not uncommon to take some roots and maybe tie some string and use some oils, but also like recite some psalms from the Bible. These are very common things together. And then there's also an influence of ceremonial magic. Um, with like different like sigils and talismans and things like that. And that kind of, combined into it. So it's this really interesting, kind of soup of different magical traditions. And so that's kind of where I started. And everything just kind of springboarded from there. Everything from, looking into different types of witchcraft to looking into ceremonial magic and how religion and magic are interlinked.
Thank you very much for sharing. So what do you call yourself today? Is there a classification, little banner that you sort of go under, or is it anything goes sort of thing, depending on what mood you're in?
My I would say spiritually, the term I like to coin is eclectic devotional polytheist because I when I first started, everyone was very much into you have to be part of this pantheon and you can't mix your pantheons together and you can't do this. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like number one, I'm mixed race. My on my father's side, it's all German with some French, mostly German. And on my mother's side, it's African American with a little bit of Native American and this little sprinkle of Irish. So that didn't make sense to me just going right out of the gate. So that being said, one of the first stories I read as a kid was Anansi, who was like the African trickster god. My father, this is kind of a weird story. My father, Mark Sr., we were, yeah, we were pretty much estranged for most of my life. But near the end of his life, we started trying to reconcile. And he said, it's funny that you're into magic and paganism and all this. He's like, when I was a kid, we used to have a little club. I said, Okay, Dad, what are you talking about? He said, we broke into this janitor's closet and we found a statue of Loki. We don't even know how it got there. And so me and my friends started making up rituals to Loki and we called ourselves the Loki Club. And I was like, huh, that explains a lot, Dad. That explains a lot. So I've had all these strange, just because of my eclectic upbringing, I've always been attracted to all these different paths. And I've kind of got a little bit here, a little bit there, mastered a little this, you know, got proficient enough in that. I joke, I have a spreadsheet of all my goals. It's like I have my goals like spread out by every year. And I've planned up to like 30 years from now. I have like 150 books actually already like plotted and outlined, believe it or not. And I know which year I'm going to write what book. Okay. And I call it my character sheet because I also like to play, Dungeons and Dragons. And so if you looked at my life as a character sheet, like okay, he's got this many stats in hoodoo, this many stats in ceremonial magic, this and et cetera, et cetera. And kind of like having like a playful approach to my life and what I develop is really helped and definitely play. Another odd influence is when I was a kid, I loved the circus. And the one thing I love more than anything, I was completely and utterly obsessed with, was this man in a beard who looked like a wizard who bred unicorns and traveled with the circus. I even had like a life-size coloring book of like Lancelot the unicorn from the Barnum Brothers and Ringley, Barnum Brothers and Ringley circus, whatever the circus was, and found out years later this was Oberon Zell. And Oberon Zell is, of course, one of the main, figures of modern paganism. And oddly enough, we became friends, through different adventures and through different circumstances. That's a actual kind of a longer story, but we became friends. And he actually wrote, a part in my book, talking about, how much he liked the book. So it's really kind of funny how things come full
Mm.
circle.
Yes, wow. It's interesting with this sort of, you said this connection that your father had with Loki, of all sort of gods in the Norse tradition, mischievous little troublemaker, should we say, just so rocks the boat. But such a, as you said, such a collective upbringing, and it makes me wonder, do you see, because of your vast sort of explorations and all these traditions, do you see common threads that appear? And I'm asking this because I have a background in sort of metaphysics or esoteric sciences, and
Mm-hmm.
even I've studied Eastern philosophies when I was doing my yoga
Mm-hmm.
teachings, and also, when I was studying my own sort of ceremonial magic and the Kabbalah, you can start seeing similarities coming through.
Mm-hmm.
But in hoodoo and all these other practices, I mean, we like to put things, you said, into little boxes, but often these boxes, these restrictions don't apply when we sort of look outside, and it's just different terms.
That's a really good question as well. I would say first off, all these little boxes, I don't view them as boxes. I mean, they're mentally constructed little boundaries that are imaginary. Let's be frank on that, okay? And unfortunately, everyone likes to take these little boxes way too seriously sometimes. I recommend a really good book called Finite and Infinite Games by James P. Carse. He talks about these quality of how the worst sin that we can create or commit is if we all the roles we wear by choice, because everything is actually a choice at the end of the day. But we wear all these different masks, go on these different roles, and put ourselves in these different boxes. But he encourages the reader to think of these boxes as a game, to have that bit of childlike wonder on things. And the greatest sin one can commit is to take the mask you're wearing or the role you're playing too seriously, and especially at the exclusion of all others. So, but with that being said, I'd probably say the common threads. I also have had quite an extensive journey in Eastern philosophy with Tibetan Buddhism and Hinduism, and that could be a whole different conversation. But from there, I really developed, kind of this core of, I really want to give back to the world. That we're all suffering, we're all having problems. The best thing that I can do, and probably the only thing that matters, is trying to help others, and with the eventual goal that we reach a degree of enlightenment. And for me, enlightenment is really, for me, like for the Buddha, Buddha said, everything's an illusion. So I will definitely agree with that, but I will say that the illusion is one very big lie. And the very big lie to me is separation. Because at the end, we're all coming from the same things. Even scientifically, we all had one origin point of the Big Bang. I mean, everything is energetically, spiritually, scientifically connected. I mean, mystics from all traditions at the end of the day will say time is illusion. There is no time, there's only one moment. And so if that's the case, then we're all connected. And when I look at things, even with my studies in alchemy and how this kind of brings in is, I look at the thing that reinforces the big lie of separation most is trauma. And if I look at trauma and how trauma and magic are connected, well, then really I'm taking the lead of trauma and the lead of circumstance and transforming it to the gold of like a higher consciousness that elevates us out of that and really helps us escape that lie of separation. So I would say that's one major thread is compassion, ultimate connection, and how that goes into transformation, helping things. I mean, even if you're doing, low magic, if you're doing thaumaturgy and you're doing a spell to like get $50 because you're broke or something, you still have to tap into something spiritual. You still have to tap into something greater than yourself. And even something that may seem self-centered or even ego-based, at the end of the day, is still going to lead you to the path of eventual connection and enlightenment.
And I think that's something that how I'm sort of choosing my words, because is it magic? Is it witchcraft these days? Am I just being too judgmental, being an old timer? Or what people are being sort of taught or exposed to on, in particular, social media. And I know I personally have ranted and raved about this a lot, but it's like they're not taught or they're not shown how everything ultimately is interconnected. And it's just like everything's sort of like self-focused. And I'm not denying that we can't do that, because isn't that the whole purpose of sort of walking the sort of spiritual, esoteric, or magical path, is ultimately self-improvement at some level, but then understanding the flow-on effect. And I think that gets sort of ignored or forgotten about. And this is something, and I know it's in one of the questions that I have to ask you, is as magical practitioners, especially as we begin to get more sort of confident in our abilities, where our world or our perception of the world around us opens up, this interconnectedness, how then can we utilize our skills to move beyond the I am, the me, to the wider community? I mean, I'm thinking at the moment, as we're recording this, there's horrific sort of wars happening. There's there's communities that have long been suppressed. Are these areas that we should be sort of using our magic to hopefully influence, or is there other ways of sort of using our understanding of this interconnectedness in a more sort of yeah, a better, wider way? I think that's what I'm trying to ask.
Sure, no, that's a great question. So, I always want to answer this, but okay. So about so 26, right? So I think it was 2000 to 2020, 2002. I can't remember. Time is the older you get, it seems like time, it's hard to keep track of time, unfortunately, which is horrifying, absolutely horrifying. It's but that being said, um, I really felt like the world was in a dark place. And so what I did was I gathered because I love magic and because I love stories. And I said, you know what? The best thing about being magic is you're the hero in your own story. And you're also the hero in your own story. We're all the heroes of our own story. And we don't have to say, oh, this person is like the grand pope of metaphysics or something. Thank the gods. I mean, we're all empowered. I mean, you know, the gods bless Scott Cunningham in Solitary Wicca for the Solitary Guide, because the greatest gift he gave everyone here is that you don't need a group. And it's not that you don't need a group necessarily, but the fact that, let's go back to the point of why many of us escaped, different religions, is that you don't need an intermediary, that you are the priest, priestess, priestess of your own religion. And yet your religion is your own spiritual path. So ultimately, there is complete and utter spiritual responsibility to oneself in being a magical practitioner. And I think that's an extremely powerful point that I think we miss sometimes. But if we're all like the head of our own religion and everyone else is, that means that there has to be some common threads that we can talk about our commonalities, we can bond on them, we can grow with that, grow with them as a foundation. We can also be enriched by the differences. You can say that person's not doing quite what I'm doing, but I want to understand why. And I think that's another thing. Going back to kind of, the rise of social media and magic, and I think it's the best thing ever. Okay, and I'll explain why. That I believe that everyone can do magic, bar none. I've seen untrained practitioners or people with a little bit of talent do things that would blow the experienced person's mind out of the water without question. So if everyone can do magic, and I like to use the analogy of basketball or football, river sport, everyone can play whatever sport it is, cricket even. God help us from cricket. I still can't, you know what? I still can't figure out all the rules of cricket. I've tried. Okay, I can understand the correspondences on the tree of life. I can understand the four different color scales on the tree of life. I've had them memorized, but God help me if you ask me to explain the rules of cricket. I'm toast. I'm gone. But anyway, I
I'm,
digress.
I'm laughing
So
because here in Australia it's a very popular game, but I don't understand it myself. I've got
yeah,
better things to do. Anyway, coming back to what you're talking about, Mark.
away from the esoteric art of mystical cricket. So, but um, my point being that magic has become more of in the popular consciousness, and that's wonderful. Just like when the printing press was invented, reading became more in the popular culture. More people were reading than ever before because of the printing press, and that was great. It wasn't just, something that this rare book that a monk spent almost his entire life copying by hand and in gilded calligraphy. Information became accessible, and the thing is, knowledge is power, but also knowledge kept, creates a power structure, creates a hierarchy. So the thing I love about social media and the internet now is that almost literally all of human knowledge is available at our fingerprints. I can go to sacredtext.com and find like, the Egyptian Book of the Dead in less than 2 seconds. It's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So that being said, the thing that I think we have a responsibility as seasoned practitioners and people that have been doing this for a while is to guide all of these people. And I don't mean like create like some sort of hierarchical group or create our own religions or cults or anything like that. That'd be absolutely disastrous. And some of that's happening now, and it's a complete cluster of madness. So I think we have the responsibility of helping, fan the flames of knowledge. And one of those things is helping people learn discernment. We have those of us who have been doing this for a while, we know the crap from that's not for the most part. Okay. I mean, sometimes something might fly by us, but that's rare once you reach a certain point. So it's our responsibility to help teach discernment. Say, look, this person actually on this website, that's just great. You did something on ChatGPT or some other AI platform. Yeah, this part was 100% correct. This part wasn't. So we can use technology as a tool and have conversations about it. I think that's also the greatest problem we have as a magical community is we're not willing to have enough conversations. We're still we're all coming from trauma, okay? And I say trauma is like the great demon of our society. Everyone is suffers from trauma, whether you're liberal, conservative, black, white, red, green, purple, any expression of wonderful genders on the rainbow. It doesn't matter. We are all affected by trauma, and if you think you're not, you're wrong because there's generational trauma. Somebody back in your bloodline and or who raised somebody was affected by a trauma, and that trauma has continued in ways that you may not be aware of. So the other thing that's extremely important to teach, aside from discernment, is self awareness, and that along with that goes with personal responsibility. And I swear, I don't think I think I'm finally in my mid 40s, finally at the point where I'm getting my head out of my posterior, and I feel like I've gained some degree of master of my own actions and awareness where I'm not being completely controlled by my trauma. And then when I am, it's like, oh man, I messed up. I made a mistake, and then I got to be accountable, and which is not fun sometimes. Let's be honest, but that's what we have to do. We have to have that self-awareness, that discernment, that self-responsibility. And also something that the Christians, I think, for those of us who have come from a Christian background, I think there's one baby that gets thrown out with the bathwater a lot, and that's grace.
Mm.
You know, I really think that if I go back to like ancient Rome, which I love ancient Rome. I love the ancient world. I am still furiously angry about the many sackings of the Library of Alexandria.
Oh, yes.
Horribly angry, horrified. Anyway, I'm not going to rant on this right now. But those of you that are like me, you know what I'm talking about. So, but I think one of the reasons Christianity had such a foothold in the ancient world is that that our pagan forebears did not have enough adequate language for compassion and grace. And that's the baby that
Mm.
gets thrown out the bathwater a lot is grace. And I see this all the
Mm.
time on witchcraft groups, on pagan groups, on occult groups. People do not have enough grace, patience, or understanding with each other. We're all trying to figure this out, okay? None of it is perfect. Probably the biggest lesson that if anyone listening to this takes one concept out of this, there's one thing I'd love to express. There are no gurus. Look, I have spent decades and more money than I care to admit trying to find the ultimate spiritual master that will teach me the secrets of the universe and how to be the most powerful magician. That's crap. It's complete and utter crap. The best teacher is yourself. And
Mm.
in my personal belief, I think that when we die as practitioners, if we decide to like not go on to like certain realms right away, if we decide to kind of be ancestors, I think when we pass, we help guide the next generation.
Mm.
That we're all in this invisible college of knowledge being passed down from our spirit mentors coming to us, and then we in turn will return the favor.
Mm.
So I think that's something that's very important. It is grace. And if we can have more grace, compassion, and love, oh my God, how come we don't say the word love in paganism and the occult enough? If we can just love each other, we're going to have what the Greeks called agape with each other.
Mm.
Honestly, the world would change just like that. If I could
Mm.
do one piece of magic, if someone said, here's like a genie or a wand, like one shot, Mark. We have one shot. You can do one thing. I'm not going to wish for $1 million. I'm not going to wish for immortality, though that would be cool. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wish for everyone's heart to be open to the ultimate degree with complete and all-consuming agape. That would
Mm.
change the world more than anything.
Yeah, and I certainly agree. And it's almost like our magical community, we're talking about macrocosms and microcosms. It's like our magical community is a microcosm of our collective. It's like, yeah, there's was it COVID? Was it before COVID? Has been an ongoing sort of like dissension Oh, as you was talking about grace, humility, and yeah, compassion, understanding, tolerance. Tolerance is a little bit of a double-edged sword of a word, but this understanding, and it's all right to disagree, but we're very, and I've mentioned this before on my channel as well, we're in a very polarized world at the moment where it is either poles, there's nothing in between. And this is one of the reasons why I started this show. It's just like, I might not necessarily agree with everybody or their opinions on here, but I'm open to listen to different interpretations, different opinions. And yeah, so thank you for reminding us. And you know, it's just, and yeah, I think we will need to sort of sometimes take a chill pill and go, if we have the right for our opinion, so does everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has an opinion.
We don't need to agree with it either. But you were
I
talking,
make. Oh, go ahead.
no, no, sorry, yep.
No, I was reminded of a story someone told me that I believe it was at PantheaCon, which is a non-defunct pagan conference in California, which imploded for various reasons, which doesn't matter. The point being, it might have been there or some other convention. I don't remember. So, but the point being is there were these two practitioners who were worked with Hecate or Hecate, and they were being asked to channel messages from Hecate, and one of them channeled the message, and then the other one was channeling or aspecting Hecate, and the other one started, and then the second one said, "I completely disagree with you." Now she's supposed to be like in aspect, she's supposed to be like drawing down the goddess, right? So theoretically, and eventually, I am going to do this magical experiment of getting a bunch of people possessed by the same deity. Because I think possession work is something that's very, very underrated. I mean, when I was, studying, more, initiatory witchcraft, and I kind of had my turn at that. The most powerful thing to me at the time was like the drawing down of the moon. When it's like, there's no question, I don't have to have faith in God or a saint or an angel. I don't have to have faith. The deity is literally embodied in the flesh. And that is for me one of the most powerful spiritual experiences. And I think that's something that energy, that presence, that's something I think gets lost a lot with the rise of the internet seeker, shall we say, and the rise of our disconnectedness of humans, but connectedness of information that things have grown into. So I would love to see more of that. But anyway, theoretically, these two priestesses should have been agreeing on things, but they were disagreeing vehemently. I mean, almost for no fist fight from what I heard. And I think about that in the magical communities, and I realized that I took about a year off from doing like almost everything but personal work. I had a lot of stuff to deal with, and I started doing a lot of shadow work, and eventually that's probably going to turn into a book. Actually, I know it's going to turn into like two books actually. But that's just a preview of coming attractions. So, but one of the biggest shadow work questions one can ask, and I kind of want to just get off ranting and go more to like practical magical tools for a minute. The best thing you can ask yourself is, why am I angry at this person? Why do I hate this person? Why do I view this person as an enemy? And then ask yourself the turning question, which is, do I do that? Do I see that in myself? Is that something that I do? And there you go. Congratulations. That is the door open for shadow work for you. So, but it really is. I mean, we project our own demons. I had a very dear magical friend who I love more than family. He was my magical brother. I loved him very, very much. And eventually he kind of went to the dark side because instead of confronting his demons, he projected them on everyone, and he cut off connections and demonized myself and all of the ones in our friend group. And we weren't just idiots just hanging on the corner. I mean, we're all like pretty decent magical practitioners of above average intelligence and reasonable people who really cared about this guy. And it didn't matter because he didn't do the work. He wouldn't, or he couldn't. And that to me is a tragedy.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I'm thinking about this day and age, shadow work is very popular these days, but they don't do the second part that you were talking about, that the self-reflection. It's a lot of it is triggers, and it's almost like, again, it's almost half of the journey, but not that sort of like looking back in the mirror at your own reflection. And then from there, it's like, okay, the choice is mine as to what I'm going to do about that, to move
Right.
through or accept it or whatever. But we are unfortunately coming to the end of our time, and I'm wanting to sort of talk to you about energy magic. I mean, you have said you've
Yes.
got like 20 or 30 books in the process, or on your spreadsheet that you
150.
150, oh my goodness, to write in 30 years.
Mhm.
You're going to be busy, but energy magic, this is one that I suppose what we have sort of been talking about, because this is something else with online communities or the internet. There isn't the sort of understanding that everything is energy, everything is connected. So you were sort of like flashing around energy magic. So what inspired you to write it? What's it about? How can people get their hands on it?
Sure.
And
Sure.
anything else you want to share about it? Because I
Absolutely.
think it is one of these books that regardless of whether you are on the path, whether you are a beginner or a seasoned practitioner, it's always good to be reminded how interconnected everything is.
Absolutely. So this really comes full circle. So I've studied obviously a ton of traditions and a ton of techniques. And the thing that I realized that the one thing everything has they all have in common is energy. That magic moves, manipulates, or transforms energy. And I have some background with like Reiki and energy healing and all sorts of stuff like that. And so something kind of clicked when I was, and that's a long story. I think it's actually in the book, but something clicked where I was like, oh my God, whether I'm like breaking a curse from someone, or if I'm doing energy healing on someone, or if I'm doing like, a spell for prosperity, it's all about energy. So I said, well, wait a minute, you know, what if I kind of take a step back and I just like work with the energy? I've got back, I can work with energy directly as an energy healer. Why can't I work with that energy directly with magic? And so then I started going on this path, and I started looking at all the things I do, and I started recreating everything I do just with energy. I mean, literally in the book, the only tool in there is like some tea lights. It's literally the only tool I talk about in the book. But I realize everything's energy, and I can move energy without the tools. And it's not just a matter of, oh, that's convenient, oh, or some, but there's a couple of real life things here. Most practitioners are, to get a little Chicago on everyone, are broke as hell. They are broke as hell. Okay. I've not seen like the Great Library of Alexandria Reborn is like a 12-foot sky is a 20-foot skyscraper in downtown Manhattan, because most of us are broke as hell. Okay. And then I also feel that everyone gets really tied up on the tools. So if we go back to the energy, we can kind of take a step back, and then we also can work on that connection, because energy connects everything. Like the Force and Star Wars, it is everywhere and penetrates everything. And so doing magic directly like that, I mean, one, it's kind of cool. You're more like a kind of like a magician or a practitioner of like a fantasy novel, honestly, which is pretty cool. But there's a practical application, but the spiritual application of that is that the more I've worked with energy directly, the more I have felt more connected to like everything, since everything's energy. And I've also realized how limitless magic really is when I look at things in energy, because energy has no boundary.
Mm.
Okay. Now, the other thing about that is kind of going full circle. When I've worked with more traditional tools of magic, especially like witchcraft, I realize that if I marry and really connect like my witchcraft practices that were more tool based with how I focus energy, my effects are through the roof. I get way better results. And then the other thing is it's another thing I really feel has been lacking in this next generation practitioners, is how many practitioners have, like I said, have been in the presence of someone being possessed by deity, by the goddess drawn down, or any deity really. Or how many have like been in this circle where they've like worked with a cone of power, and they've helped build a cone of power, and they know not only how to sense that energy, but to be a part of it, you know, in a constructive manner, and also how to do it themselves and lead others in a group to do that. I mean, a lot of this is getting not lost, but it doesn't have as much of a loud voice. So I felt like by bringing energy back into the conversation, it can really not only jumpstart people's practices, but I think it help a lot of people. And To get my book, just go answer the question. It's on Amazon. I've got like 4.8 rating with 32 reviews, which isn't I'd like more reviews, to be honest. But 4.8, hey, that's pretty good. And, I've talked to people at conferences and people have messaged me all the time. And, I know the book has helped a lot of people and it's really jump-started a lot of people's magical practice. And it's also a beginner and advanced book. So if you're just starting out, you can literally give this to
Mm.
someone who just started witchcraft yesterday and say, here, read this. You're going to get to go. I literally have taught the first exercise to people who don't practice magic, like bookstores. Like I was buying an antique brass key, long story. And the very kind shop owner was like, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I'm going into magic, like I rant about. And then I teach her like an energy ball exercise. She's like, "Oh my God, magic is real." She was freaking out. And it was awesome because she had that sense of wonder. And
Mhm.
I really think that's one of the best things about magic is having that wonder and curiosity. And the people that I care about the most and the people that have given the most to me in magic, they're the ones who cultivate that
Mm.
more like breathing and drinking water, is cultivating curiosity, wonder, and awe.
Mm. Mm. And as you said, yeah, it's all around us, and it connects us back into our real world, our reality, being part of Earth, being part of nature, being part of it, as opposed to our modern perception that we tend to be separate from nature. It's just like, no, we're part of the real world. And again, macrocosm, microcosm, when we start looking at and understanding our connection within our own selves, that is because everything's energy, that then flows on, whether we call it perception or whatever, how we move around the world, how we see the world, how we see others, other beings, etc. And it's a big circle. I do have one more question before we go, Mark, and it was something that maybe I should have asked you a little bit earlier, because in the introduction you mentioned about, well, I mentioned, introduced you as being an exorcist, is something that you sort of also teach other people. You did sort of mention in your story, like how you did see, we call them spooks, spirits around. How is this connected? Do you feel this is connected in with, and I'm thinking, you mentioned the trauma that we're all possessed, where we all have, that's been ongoing. We've had so many wars, so many displaced souls. I don't know if you can answer this really, where I'm going with this. As an exorcist, have
Mhm.
you seen like an increase or a change in being? Is there a lot more need of, and we did mention sort of like the light and dark energy as well, like more earthbound spirits due to trauma, due to what's happening in our collective, with people not being able to sort of like completely, I don't know, think about other people, be a bit more compassionate and move through it in that area.
No, 100%. I have noticed over the years that things have been ramping up. I think part of it, I definitely know part of it. Part of it is that more people are doing magic actively. That is definitely a factor. Two, I jokingly say, everyone's like, "Oh man, you can banish spirits and you can, exorcise ghosts and all that." People are like, "Oh man, that's so cool." I'm like, "It's nothing like Hollywood." I'm like, "This is not glamorous, okay? I am a janitor of the gods. I am a freaking janitor, okay? Pushing a big metaphysical broom." Or I guess, that kind of works with a witchcraft pun, I guess. But the point being, there's a lot of energies and spirits that have just collected and that people haven't dealt with. What I want to do, so this is kind of a preview of like some projects I'm working on. Like I love paranormal shows, and my partner in crime, she loves them too. We watch them a lot together. And the one thing I haven't seen is someone take like a little EMF detector, where you use the ghost tools, and have someone get evidence of the ghost or the spirits, do an exorcism, and then read it again. So I'm going to be doing some experiments of my own. When those are done, I'll have a YouTube channel on that, on exorcisms. But that's the thing. There's so much activity. There's so many people that have lived. There's, you know, all this collective psychic goo going on, and everything's like so charged. I mean, anyone who's done magic for like 5 seconds knows what like an energy, like a room that's charged with energy feels like different than one that's not. And our whole world is more and more charged. The polarization as we talk. I mean, obviously, if we go back to Kabbalah, that those pillars on the tree of life are like positive and negative, generating energy, generating the energy of existence. So if we have like so many people being polarized and literally all like go back to like electricity, you know, things are generated by how those poles are, relate to each other. So if things are getting more polarized, think about like the giant psychic battery that is being created right now. That's actually kind of frightening when you think about it.
Mm, mm.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
very
scared, but I mean, it's also an opportunity for a lot of cool stuff. And we could use
yeah.
that battery as, the kickstart the next level of human
Mm,
evolution of consciousness and magical thought.
And it comes back to what you were saying earlier about discernment and taking self-responsibility and personal sort of responsibility as to if we are creating this giant sort of battery, how we are then going to utilize it as a whole, because we're all connected with the energy flowing through. So as we're coming to the end of our time, Mark, and we could have this discussion for many hours to come, what would be any advice that you have to offer a seeker, just sort of like really new, starting out in relation to magic or energy work, or even someone who is beginning to see or has always seen, ghosts or spooks in the peripheral and really have no one that they can first talk to about? What's the basic advice you would offer someone, a seeker?
I would say the first thing is, I know this is going to sound a little rudimentary, but learn to meditate, learn to quiet yourself, learn to find out what's your voice versus other things. Sometimes the spirits you see could be like psychic projections of yourself. I have seen that happen. Um, and I don't want to go, I know we're running out of time, so I don't want to go to a long story, but there's learning what's yours versus someone else's. Even if you're like an empath, they're like, I go into a room and I feel everyone's emotions. Okay, listen, everyone does magic. Everyone's actually an empath. It's just that empaths have more trauma, and their trauma makes them more sensitive to people's emotions because they've had to learn how to read the room to make sure they're not going to get beat up or some other trauma. So if you're an empath, I guarantee you have trauma. So that being said, learning what's yours and what isn't, and finding some way to quiet yourself. And there's many different ways of meditation, of course. So not just you don't just have to sit and say Om, obviously. So I would say learn to meditate. Work on these core skills that can be the foundation of practice. Meditation. Taking care of your body. And I know that sounds silly, but having like enough discipline to take care of your body. If you can get discipline in one aspect of your life, just one, I promise you that discipline will carry over to your magical practice. And maybe you're not good at taking care of yourself because you have some issues with that. And a lot of people do. And I know I've had for years myself. But finding one thing you can have discipline in, that will help you tremendously. So I'll say meditation, a way to get discipline. But I would also say be curious. And the other side of being curious is also being questioning. Okay. So be curious about things, but also ask yourself questions. Don't take anything for granted. Even me. Like if you like say, man, Mark, this awesome book that's got 4.8 stars on Amazon that is available at major booksellers, and if they're not, you can ask for it and they'll get in your local bookstore, and you can go to Mark's website and get information on how your bookstore can order it. Even if you read my book, you could say, man, this is crap. You could say, you know what? I don't believe half what you're saying, Mark. And when we can have a conversation, but if you can be curious, be questioning, have discernment, I think that's incredible. I think that is what all seekers need to do. And even those of us who've been doing this for a while might need a refresher on that once in a while.
And sometimes it's like a new person or a seeker's question that makes you go, never thought about it like that.
Mhm.
Interesting. Let me get back to you. But yes, it's also, yeah, we are perpetual students. There's so much out there. No one can know everything. I know the older I get, the less I realize I know. And I'm forever questioning even my own abilities. As well, and even what I've written in my own book, so which also
Yeah, you
are
guys wrote
available.
some great books, so
I think that's the whole thing. It's just like, yeah, the books, just our point of views, they're not gospel, they're not carved in stone, but question. And you said, be curious. It's a big wide world out there. and we're all connected due to energy and really magic. So, Mark,
Definitely, I completely agree with you.
it has been an absolute delight chatting with you today. Thank you very much for your time. Now, we have mentioned that you've got a website. Would you just, and we'll put the link below, but just a shout out to your website, which is over to you.
Which is my name. So it's Mark NeCamp Jr.com. So that's MarkNeCampJr.com. Information on how to get my book. There's a billion links to get my book. Um, but I'm also pride myself on being one of the more approachable practitioners and authors. And I'm not trying to insult anybody, but some people are way more popular than I am and just don't have as much time, and that's okay. But I pride myself on trying to help people no matter what. Now, granted, this caused a really funny incident of Oberon having someone call me at 3 in the morning about their sister being possessed, which I totally like kind of gave Oberon the eye at next time I talked to him after, which is hysterical. It's like, are you the wizard, Mark? Are you the wizard, Mark? It's someone in like this very thick foreign accent. I don't even know where they're calling from. Like, my sister needs help. Are you the wizard, Mark? I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Like, Oberon's house, they're calling. I'm like, oh, geez, my number. And so I just kind of embrace it now. So like my phone number is literally on my website. You can literally text me. You can email me. Just don't give me like a psychic message because that will probably get lost in the voicemail. So
Wonderful. And you also got a fantastic sense of humor as well. Wonderful. Once again, Mark, thank you very much for your time and for talking about the magic in you.
thank you so much for having me, Francis. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you so very much.